Wellness and resilience work to combat and counter the impact from the job, both physically and mentally. The science shows it. Departments and agencies have wellness initiatives, but now research is showing that these programs are not being accessed as we'd hoped. Today, I speak with Brian Ellis, a retired officer and creator of Magnus Worx, about the research and science of wellness and resilience and what it means to you. Brian says if law enforcement organizations want the best out of their people need to thrive at home and at work. He goes on to say that the state of public safety well-being is alarming, and while expectations for this community continue to rise, that not enough is being done to revive the profession and live up to the expectations that everyone needs in this noble profession to perform at their best. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Code 4 Couples podcast.
Welcome to the Code 4 Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and Code 4. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cyndi Doyle, author of Hold the Line and My Wife.
Hey there, and welcome back to Code 4 Couples. I am your host, Cyndi Doyle, LEO wife and law enforcement counselor. And I today have on Brian Ellis. And Brian is going to talk to us all about wellness trends. He is a retired law enforcement officer with over 25 years of experience, consulted with organizations and working on local and statewide initiatives to help public safety thrive. He currently is highlighted in several media outlets such as the FBI Bulletin, Police Chiefs Magazine, and the Oxford Press. And he is the creator of Magnus Worx. Hope I said that right, Brian. Did I say that right?
Yes, Magnus Worx.
Okay, good. And we're going to talk about well-being and the trends. We know that there are a lot of peer support and wellness initiatives and wellness teams going on. And so and you know that I am hot on that, but I am also hot on making sure that the family and the spouses are included in that process. So, Brian, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about what's going on with this and what the trend is and where we're going with this. I appreciate you being here.
So humbled to be here. Thanks for having me, for sure.
Yeah. So let me just start off a little bit by telling everybody just a little bit about you. How did you get into wellness and why did that become a hot topic for you?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. That's a great question. I think I'll backstep and, I'm a retired law enforcement officer, did 25 years in the business. And I was fortunate enough in those 25 years to work a number of assignments from patrol and community oriented policing assignments, detective. I've been in narcotics and SWAT and Homeland Security, all the fun things that you get to do on the job. An officer, detective, a sergeant. I retired as a lieutenant. And, throughout my career, I was your typical cop. Early on in my career, if you asked me what wellness was, it was making sure I was going to the gym. But beyond that, it really didn't mean anything to me. And, as we get older, I think we spend more time in reflection. And, I think mid-career, I started to get an understanding that how important leadership was, and leadership is, being resilient and having a growth mindset and being a continuous learner. And so it started me on this wellness track, even though I was looking at leadership just through a self-development and having the right tools for promotions and supervising and managing, but indirectly, it was introducing me, to wellness a little bit more. And then what I call my better 7/8, my wife.
Oh, that's awesome.
If I said better half, I'm giving myself way too much credit. But, she's a health nut, a biohacker. She's really into this functional medicine space on looking at root causes of things. So I'm spoiled when we think about wellness. Is I eat really well at home because She loves to cook. We have a whole food diet. You go into our pantry and there's really not a whole lot in there other than, nuts and olive oil and, and fruits and root vegetables. But, I think as I've gotten older, this wellness journey's really what I would say matured.
Yeah. And I think about all these aspects of wellness. We have, you just mentioned like exercise and eating. And of course, I'm talking about relationships. You mentioned also resilience mindset. There's like just in that nice little nugget, there were so many different aspects of wellness that you come around to. So what I know you are into, maybe we should talk a little bit about what Magnus Worx does. Like, how did that come about and what does it do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the National Command and Staff College is an organization that's been around about 14 years or so. And so we've, since an inception, we've trained over 11 million hours of training with like a 98% user satisfaction rating. Dr. Javidi, who's the founder of the National Command and Staff College, he comes to law enforcement from the military and academia. And so he had been teaching special operations in the military, leadership and, essentially brain science applications to make the men and women in the military thrive. And so we've been doing this leadership thing for a long time. And I've been fortunate to be part of this team for about a decade. And year after year after year, we take polls and listen, really listen to what our students are saying. And the resiliency piece was struggling. And so we really pivoted our game plan in looking at, if we're chasing performance, if organizations are chasing performance and people are chasing performance, high performing people are well because at least they attempt to be well in a lot of things. I know a lot of, CEOs that are not living a wellness lifestyle for sure because they've got, ambitious goals, but, generally speaking, there's a lot more to being well than just, leadership and resilience. And so we started really kind of diving into that literature, looking at things that we needed. And then we found a technology partner a couple of years ago. And that's what I'm really excited to talk about is because, really, I think that when you start thinking about well-being, technology has been the missing piece. And then hence Magnus Worx was born.
Okay. So I know you have some trends that you wanted to talk about. So what are some of the trends that you are seeing? Because I know that so many departments, of course, there's wellness initiatives and they've been around for a while and a lot of departments have wellness teams. And yet you and I were just talking a little bit ago before we got on the mic that I had seen an article that came through in one of my groups that wellness initiatives at the workplace really weren't making a big difference. And so what are some of the stats that you're seeing and where do we go with that?
Now we're getting to the exciting stuff.
Yeah, come on.
I have a slide that I can share with you later on that kind of gives you a visual. But if you can think of an axis where you have performance on one side and stress on the other, and then you had 4 quadrants. And in the very top left quadrant, it's serenity. It's being serene. If you can imagine, being serene's the very top, and below serene, you have composed. And on the other 2 sides of that, on that stress axis, you have anxious and angry. Okay.
So imagine is anxious on the same level as serenity?
So you had serenity, you had anxious on the top, angry down below it, and composed below serene. You have this 4 set quadrant.
Okay. And tell us the axis again.
The top axis would be, the up axis is performance.
Okay.
So if you're composed, you're probably not performing. That you have more to give. The more serene you are, you have more performance. And then if you're, then as you add stress, you can move from composed to angry or anxious. You've got these 4 different quadrants.
Okay.
Just by, if I were to ask you, if you had to put law enforcement as a culture, as a profession in one of those buckets, just one, where would you put them?
That would be a difficult answer. I don't think it would be serenity or serene. I might lead towards anxious, actually.
Well, it's funny because we've polled this amongst over 4,000 law enforcement partners, executives, managers, supervisors, officers, professional staff. And we ask it in every class that we teach to see just hands going up. And we ask people to put the profession and their organization in these boxes. And, a lot of people put themselves in this angry and anxious area.
Mm.
And what's frustrating as somebody who's been in the business and a community member who, I want my public safety people to thrive and to perform as promised. When you're angry or anxious, your body is making chemicals that are just not good for you.
Right. Cortisol, all kinds of fight or flight stuff going on, right?
Epinephrine. These are good hormones and necessary in specific moments, but you're constantly being taxed on them. They're killing you.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to if you have more serenity in your life, you're producing happy hormones, oxytocin, serotonin. And I'm not saying that
dopamine.
Hey, let's transform police organizations to where they're in every moment of their career, they're going to be serene.
My husband would say, we're not going to be the kumbaya department, right? That's what he would call it. Yeah.
I mean, police in general deal with people at their saddest, maddest, and baddest. In
absolutely.
Uncertain, complex environments that are ambiguous. People are brittle. Things are nonlinear. People are anxious. I mean, it's volatility at its best. It's chaos.
Absolutely. Yes.
But what we found is this fragility is rampant, but we expect these men and women to perform at their highest best. And we're not taking advantage of we're missing opportunities to help them bounce in and out of certain states in a way that kind of modulates their total health.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand and when you think about that fight or flight or the hypervigilance going up and down all the time, right? So that's why I went anxious, because to me, anger sometimes is a cover emotion, right? So, or cover feeling, but that anxiety, and also dealing with mental health all the time, I see a lot of anxiety. So because I see officers that want to control environments, to me, that is an antidote to anxiety. And I think that's interesting. Well, in the quadrant, I think we would all probably agree that we don't have serene or composed departments in general. So how do we, and I don't know, I want to say how do we fix that? But maybe we're not there yet, because you said there's some elements you want to talk about too.
Yeah, well, it goes back to, getting deeper into the question that you asked. And that's, hey, we have wellness programs. Hey, we have this app, or we have, this group of people, and it just doesn't seem to be working. So the problem is, the answers are kind of right in front of us. Wellness is not an issue that just public safety is facing. I mean, I think public safety, unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, is the world ends up moving a lot faster, and we're always trying to catch up to it because, we're just so busy dealing with those volatile moments. And in 2023, Deloitte put out a paper. And if you not familiar with Deloitte is a leading change management consulting company, and they're looking at, organization, every organization, every vertical across the globe. And they described there's 4 stages of wellness maturity for organizations. And there's a foundational stage where, you focus in on health and compliance. It's not really, there's really not a whole lot of substance to it. The second stage is this emerging stage where there's real investments made in programs and training. And then the third phase is called progressive, where there's some leader-led approaches and established wellness programs. And I feel that most police organizations are in the 2 and 3 bucket. I mean, if you have a peer support team or a wellness, some kind of wellness toolkit, I would probably put you in the 3. We come across a lot of police organizations they're not even there yet, but want to get there, which is promising. But this 4th stage, the kumbaya of wellness transformation, is this transformational stage where wellness is a systems approach.
Okay.
Right? It's a strategic imperative where it integrates into everything from how you recruit people and retain people, your talent management, to how you work operationally. And it's a shared approach from the top down, meaning that, everybody sees it for what it is, but it's integrated in everything that we do. But it also looks at and assesses metrics, including self-reported data. And I think that that's really where public safety in general is missing the boat. Data is incredibly important. And we can go on and on and on about why well-being and paying attention to this is so important. Harvard Business Review says that it impacts everything that we do, from leadership to communications to partnerships that we can make. If we want better community relationships, we have to be well. In order to treat people well, we have to be well ourselves. GymPass is another organization that polled over 2,000 HR professionals in the United States. And I want to say it's 90% of organizations saw a positive return on their, positive ROI on their wellness investments. 85% of those professionals said there was a reduction in recruitment costs and sick days. 77% of employees said that they would leave organizations that didn't prioritize well-being. Mm-hmm. And 83% of employees said it's as important as their salary. So people are telling us, they're raising their hands saying, yes, this is important to me. And we live in a time where there's 4 generations in the workforce, and our younger generations are not resilient. The data is out there showing us that resiliency is something that is fleeting us, and we need to do something about it.
I was also wondering too, when we look at the size of departments, like there are so many smaller departments. And of course, I live in Texas. I don't know where you are, but we are vast, right? So we could have, and I know I've talked to some departments out in Utah even, and there is like a small number of people that are running a county, multiple counties. And so when it comes to money, right? It's difficult to, usually it's a choice of like making that investment in wellness in a department. No, I think there's other ways to do it, but I'm going to go this direction initially. Like it's difficult, I think, for smaller departments to be at even the progressive or the transformational level when they would love to be emerging, but because of money, cost, personnel, resources, it makes it really difficult. So is there a way that departments can move, or law enforcement cultures can move into maybe even emerging levels when they are low on resources? Because you know as well as I know that there are a ton of smaller departments out there struggling. That's
a fantastic question. And, I had a chief that once said that time, people, and money fix everything, right? Mm-hmm. There's probably a little bit of truth to that. But, I know for a long time, we talked about, we being the law enforcement profession has talked about regionalization. And we put our toe in the water in regards to those. Some municipalities are really great at it. And whether it's regionalized SWAT teams or, Homeland Security efforts, but beyond that, we got a lot of growth to do there. And then the way we buy products the way that law enforcement agencies are consumers, we often look for the cheapest product. It's a price thing because we're like, okay, well, we only have this much budget. But, I'll use my own self as a perfect example. My wife once brought me home $100 shirt, and I'm like, ugh. Like it's $100 for a shirt. And she's like,
but it will last longer.
You're going to look great in this shirt, and it's going to last a lot longer. I still have that $100 shirt, and I've blown through a ton of $20 shirts. So
right.
Value, you have to really look at value in a different way because price doesn't cut it. And then just get creative because, I can speak for my organization, and we love to pool people together. Our technology can allow, multiple groups to come in as one entity, but then we can tenant off all their data so nobody gets to see anybody else's data, but they're in this collective pool. And, we can start really giving them resources they need on a scale and be intuitive and customizable to their inherent needs, because not everybody's issues are exactly the same. But again, that's a systems approach that we have to change in policing. Is don't go to a trade show and just buy something off the box and expect it to work. Well-being, again, going back to being transformational, it has to be a shared systems approach, thinking from the chief sheriff director on down.
And, you're talking about I was thinking of the word collaboration as well. And it's a mindset shift too, when you're talking about all the different benefits that come from wellness. But man, it would be really fun to get some of those new trikes to ride around on a trail, right? It's kind of this balance of what's important and shifting that around. I love the idea of technology. My brain goes crazy because I think about how we were kind of forced into, I was doing telehealth before it was cool, but we were forced into using technology in a different way during COVID, and to be able to figure out how do we get the education out there. And I think that provides some flexibility for people. And so I'm interested in the tech. I've got got it written down, but I know that there was some more stats that you want, or some other aspects that you wanted to give us as well, I think.
Well, let's just talk about technology for a little bit, because
okay, let's talk about technology. I love it.
When we talk about wellness is, how do we measure effectiveness? And so, you may look at a wellness product or an initiative that an organization does, and they feel really good about it, and they say, "Oh, this is winning, and this is working." But is that how the entire organization sees it? And my argument is, unless you're measuring and getting that self-reported data, you have really no idea. And a lot of organizations, even measuring morale, which is a baseline indicator for good employee engagement. I know my organization, my previous organization, I'm not knocking anybody here. I'm just, speaking of the truth and how it was. We would do sometimes an annual survey or every other year survey, which the problem with those is that you're looking at data for a snapshot in time, and things could be going well for the organization prior to taking that survey, or things could be, really terrible that affect that survey. They also things that affect the survey that it takes you 30 minutes to do it, and you get fatigued. You're like, you answer.
Start making Christmas trees.
Really with good intention, and you're like, how many more questions are there?
Yeah.
And you're measuring one time and really not kind of benchmarking what are you doing to change any of those results. And then if you want to know how things are going, you go into a roll call and say, "Hey, have you heard any good rumors lately?" Because that's your only way to pulse morale, and that just doesn't work. And so, relying on having a technology partner that can give people a safe environment to speak their mind. And I think some of the fear is, well, they're cops. They're going to be angry and throw a bunch of crap at us, and they're going to be cynical. And no, these people, they're going to spend a lot of their adult life in an organization. They care about where they work, and early on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because they've had their hand raised for a long time, and nothing has changed.
So what should we be measuring?
Well, we measure all kinds of. So we basically measure across a number of flourishing models, right? We have to measure people from a me and a we, and from a me perspective and a we perspective, looking at organizational things that cause people. I mean, when we think about well-being, we think about, okay, let's talk about stressors for police in general or public safety. You have internal and external stressors. You have behavioral stressors. I might drink too much, smoke too much, eat too much fast food. When you ask an organization, how do you respond to this stuff? Well, the internal stressors is really the one area that an organization can really start to dial in and get right. And there's a lot of them.
Can I ask you a question really quickly? So you mentioned flourishing and why. So what you can't see if you're listening is I turned around and I was looking on my bookshelf because and I'm curious about this because flourishing is an aspect of positive psychology. So I didn't know if the two are related at all. Is there an overlap between that word and the flourish and what you're looking at and positive psychology?
Absolutely. So you think about human beings, the one, and this is kind of going into how we learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about, there's this a thing called the curve of forgetting. If we were to go to a class and we take a class for one day or a whole week class, 4 weeks after that, we've retained, 5 to 10%. Very little really sticks. What sticks is when we do it, when we're repetitive in our nature. So it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Whether it's a squat, I'm trying to teach myself how to be, have better, stronger squats. I have to squat a lot. If I want to public speak better, I have to public speak a lot. There's this power in repetition because, neurons that fire
together, wire together. Yes.
Right? And when we say cynicism is high in public safety or in law enforcement, and this is true, well, then my question becomes, what are we doing to combat all that saddest, maddest, and baddest every day, and all the other opportunities to bring attention and intention to all the things that encompass well-being? And so we come from a place, at the National Command and Staff College in Magnus Worx, what we do is we see performance and well-being in these, 11 rings, 11 domains of well-being. So we're going to give you repetitions in relationship development and emotional factors. And that's kind of, emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, really help you understand your mental toughness, leadership capacity, your resiliency fitness, the ability to cope, and really how to cope. Family dynamics, family dynamics are a large part of, your well-being on and off duty.
Yes.
Everybody kind of, we've seen sometimes relationships and family dynamics are mashed together, and they're interconnected for sure, because there's a lot of skills that are needed on both. But, family dynamics are completely different than maybe how you approach your neighbor or peer at work. So then we're going to get into social connections, financial stability, spiritual being, occupational fulfillment, and physical health optimization. So those are our 11 things that we bring attention and intention and measure around to make sure that we do have a person that understands how to flourish and is, more importantly, getting reps in those areas. So when they need them, when life kind of hits us, because it will hit us all, that we have something to fall back on.
That's such like a whole person kind of perspective. You're talking about First of all, flourishing positive psychology. Love that. You were talking about the reps. I put the make sure they're getting reps. And so you went exactly what I was thinking about as far as mindset and the idea of like, how are you, I always say stretching or exercising that muscle. So like when you've exercised it or stretched it one way, it's like, well, if I just used that's my left arm, my left bicep over and over and over again, like how am I going to use the other muscles in my arm, or how am I going to stretch this muscle differently so it doesn't get, lopsided? And it's really what you're talking about. It's like all of these different elements. I missed two, but all of these different elements that you have, these 11. And then, so I'm guessing that there's a way of interweaving all of this is looking at these, being intentional around these domains of well-being, and then getting the reps that they need and then measuring things along the way. Can we unpack just really maybe like a couple of minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes, about what do you see as the difference between relational and family dynamics? Because I can interpret that, but I think everybody listening would be really interested in specifically those two because of the focus of the podcast.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of skills. And so again, I think what we said early on is, there's a lot that goes into family dynamics. And I think and yes, in a systems approach, they all have interoperability and are interconnected. And so when we say there's a difference between family dynamics and relationship development, there's still going to be a lot of overlapping skills.
Absolutely.
That help you in your spiritual, awareness and how much you self-reflect. And when you self-reflect, you're helping yourself in your spiritual being, in your leadership opportunities, in your resiliency, in your relationships. And so all these things are kind of yin and yang together. They are interconnected. But what's fascinating is when we have a ton of assessments that we're able to do and start bringing some attention on what does it mean about family dynamics? What are certain things important? And I can use myself as a perfect example of how I failed an element of family dynamics. And on the drive home after my shifts, when I was a manager, I have a half an hour commute home, and I would spend that time calling up people that I'm connected with in the organization, making sure that they're okay, helping them however I can. And I would pull into the driveway and park my car, and I walk through the door like this.
He's got a cell phone to his ear. I know y'all can't see that. Yeah.
And I have my cell phone to my ear, and as I open up the door, my baby girl is running to me, "Daddy's home."
Mm-hmm.
And I grab her and I'm like, "Just a second, baby," and
right.
And I that conversation. Well, my better 7/8 didn't let that, she let it go on long enough to realize that it was a habit, and then, brought it to my attention. And again, it's attention is really what sometimes we miss. And when we talk about being mindful, it's really, are we bringing our attention, into specifics? And in that very moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I had no intention on ever making my daughter not feel important. I was only trying to help other people.
Right.
But sometimes you have to reflect enough to say, it doesn't matter what you intended to do. What is it that you are doing? And more importantly, fix that to make your situation better. And so it's just, it's bringing attention and intention, to those things that really matter at the end of the day. I mean, after a 25-year career, as soon as you punch out, somebody's in your office. I mean, sometimes they're moving in before you're all the way moved out.
Yep.
The bullet train keeps going. And if you haven't done enough time under tension and doing the things you're supposed to be doing at home,
yeah,
you have the possibility of going home to an empty house too. And that's what we don't want.
Yeah. I mean, of course, your example is spot on because it's something that I talk regularly to y'all, everybody listening, that it is about intention and in the intentionality. And when you, I teach a process. It's like when you get in the car, let's have a ritual to think about how do you want to shift that mindset to those people coming home. So I love that, you're talking about the attention, but also the intention of improving in all these areas of these 11 areas. So I know that you've said there's some technology part to this, and I'm wondering if this is the place where we talk more about technology.
Yeah, I mean, we can. What our technology, I think what's exciting about it, and it goes back to some of the wellness problems that we face in wellness programs, especially when we think about public safety. Confidentiality becomes the number one word.
Yeah.
Everything's got confidential.
Yep.
And the issue is in organizational life, nothing's confidential. I hate to say it, but anytime anybody's involved in an internal affairs investigation or this and that, everybody figures out, knows somebody that's leaking some information here and there and everywhere, and it just gets messy.
Mm-hmm.
Confidentiality is very important to a successful, peer support program.
Absolutely.
Developing people.
Yeah.
And so we put these brakes and blinders on because we think, okay, I think it makes us afraid of data when we think about wellness because we think we're going to break confidentiality. And I don't think is true. Number two, there's a difference between confidentiality and anonymity. And so how can you be completely anonymous to the point that you can say things and nobody knows it's you?
Like it can't get traced back. Absolutely.
Because that's really where you can make a significant difference. And so our technology partner, their technology was initially founded in the professional sports industry, to look at could they get data from an athlete and reduce non-contact football injuries. And when a coach asks an athlete, hey, are you ready to play? The answer is always what?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's always yes.
Mm-hmm.
Much like a police officer, are you good? Yeah, I'm
absolutely.
Good.
I'm fine.
I'm fine, because it comes back to, cops are afraid, hey, look, nobody's going to take my gun and badge.
Right.
I got kids to feed. I got, I got obligations or whatever. And so there's this scale of fear that's, exacerbated to, that's not really necessary. And same with an athlete. An athlete, they're like, if I tell the coach I'm not game ready, I might not get the best contract and I might miss out on time on the field. And when in reality, when we can make an anonymous environment where athletes or, public safety personnel are able to really talk to us, they really talk to us. And the beautiful thing about technology is that we're able to separate their personal information, my name, but keep all this aggregate data to really get a holistic wellness picture and really be able to get in the weeds of data. Because it's one thing to have a dashboard that says, look at our entire organization and we're healthy because, the mean, everybody participated. But we're able to we can start looking at certain data sets. And what we've found in even our own clients is there's a drastic difference between measuring an organization as a whole and measuring 25 to 30-year-olds. You're going to get different numbers on resiliency and coping and emotional well-being because they're just in different places in their own life growth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the question for us was, how can we provide a profession the opportunity to look at their lowest hanging fruit? Because they're dealing with they're on fire. Their hair's on fire. Their uniform's on fire. They're responding to, chaos. Everything's chaos all the time. So there's this limited ability to think, and the resources are stretched in anyway. Let's create opportunities for them to see their lowest hanging fruit. And these are the areas that if you focused in on right now, that you can make an immediate difference.
So what are some of the trends that you're seeing? Like, what do departments need to be aware of? What do we need to be aware of going forward and trying to impact? You already mentioned the younger generation struggling with resilience, which I thought was, I wrote that one down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, think for a lot of different reasons. And you look at, for example, what's changed over the last 15 plus years. Technology's changed a lot, and sometimes we've grown accustomed just to text too much or communicate.
Yeah, that connection's different.
Connection is very different, and so with that, I think some of the other technology pieces. It's a pretty old article now, but it's still very relevant. There's an article called, "Is Facebook making you lonely?"
Mm-hmm.
And because you're seeing people at the best moments of your life, and so socially, that misconnection is impacting our resilience, and we have to figure out ways of giving the repetitions to our younger folks in a way in which they'll consume them.
Yeah.
Listen to us, and then hopefully start changing that behavior.
Are there other trends or other information that would be helpful for everybody to be aware of, other departments to be aware of as they're listening to this?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest one is really if wellness has not been a priority to you, it really needs to be, right? It's a strategic imperative, and it needs to be. And not only do you need to go, okay, well, we need to do wellness, but we should be setting our goal at being having transformational wellness maturity, right? Where it is in everything that we do. Because if we can't expect, and I'm just going to look at law enforcement by themselves as opposed to just all public safety. We can't expect cops to make the best decisions in the field if they're not right.
Absolutely.
And some organizations will say, well, I can only control them when they're at work. I can only make them do. Yes and no, but we live in such a transformational time where the scale, the amount of resources that we can give somebody electronically is so much more cost effective. If I try to train the department or send a couple people out to training, they got to travel and hotel room. It's not cost effective. But if we can go back to the psychological concepts that we were talking about earlier, if we want to change people's behaviors, we have to understand what makes a behavior happen, and it starts with feelings. Feelings, bring out behaviors. Well, feelings sit on attitudes, and attitudes are based upon beliefs, and those beliefs are kind of based upon programming. So we've got to flip that entire script. We program by giving a lot of repetition in the right areas that build better beliefs, that lead to better attitudes. Attitudes change feelings, and then those feelings will change behaviors. And so when we think about outcomes that we want, and if we're only looking at behaviors, we're completely missing the opportunity that's in front of us.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's something that I talk about a lot, client-wise, and also when I'm teaching. It's like you can change two things, and both of those have to be changed, right? Your behaviors and your beliefs. But it's in changing your beliefs that it motivates behavior many times. And, there's all kinds of philosophical quotes about that as well, right? So kind of that combination of moving those beliefs, the attitudes, which then move the behaviors around, which will make a more, I don't want to say more well, but a healthier community where we're looking at wellness and not just, we have healthy people, right? You have to have healthy people in order to have healthy officers or healthy law enforcement personnel, as you were saying. So it kind of starts there. And what you're saying is that there's a lot of things that can be measured. There's these 11 components and just small behaviors is what I'm hearing too. Like, how do you make those small habits change? And doing it kind of one step at a time, but having departments to really look at what the data is, or maybe working with y'all to figure out what their individual data is and how they can impact their department or agency in a positive way so that they can impact the officers that are working with them.
100%. I love that Texas reference in there. You got a y'all.
I was like, what did I say?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, really, and I'll share this because I think it's really important is, it's one thing to be servicing, public safety organizations to bring a product to them that can help them. And that's great. And I just had, I have an agency right now that asked us to do a pitch and dance for them. And then they wanted a little trial of our product. And they have a meeting next week to make a final decision. And the one thing that, I asked that particular person was, hey, have you reached out to any of the references, like our current customers? Because I really don't think you can make an informed decision on us until you really talk to somebody who's using us, because we're not just a product. I believe in thriving human beings. I want every person to thrive. And I'm not just talking cops or firefighters. I want everybody to thrive.
Sure. Yeah.
Best opportunities to live their best life. And if we can't make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to do that, well, then we are failing as a company. And I can tell you right now, I'm completely blessed to be in a room filled with amazing resiliency, mentally tough, spiritual people who are constantly chasing, giving back and making people better. And so I'm not here to pitch us, but what I could say is when organizations are looking for products, those are the questions they need to ask is, as opposed to just using a product that everybody else is using, because that was the frustrations that I had when I was on the job. Is if the chief said, hey, we need a policy on X, that one of my peers would just start calling up a number of agencies asking them, do they have a policy on this? And can I get a copy?
Right.
And there's no critical thing. And then you look at that policy, it doesn't really fit the needs of our organization. And so we really need to get back to critical thinking in the aspects of, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the best move forward? And do we have the right people in this bus to make a difference? And that's kind of our philosophy. And we think that, it starts with data, and nobody else is using data in this wellness space like we are, because they're afraid, they're afraid of like, okay, somebody's going to use that data for ill will. Well, you really can't use our data for ill will because we can't put those two pieces of data back together. And it allows us to really holistically, make significant change. Two partners that are willing to make that strategic investment.
Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice when you're thinking about the individuals listening out there? Maybe their department is not taking the lead on something like this. Do you have a piece of advice for those individual officers or law enforcement personnel out there that recognize this, that want to do something on their own?
Yeah, I mean, number one is we have a book coming out late this spring. Hopefully, it better not be by summer, where it's in you give a couple of men a book project and they always want to change it. So be on the lookout for the release of our book, where we're going to dive into those 11 domains of
Do you know the title of the book yet?
It's it's the 11 rings of wellness.
Okay.
And I mean, if you follow us on LinkedIn
Where would they follow you at?
at Magnus Worx, and then I would also follow the National Command and Staff College. I promise I'll get us on other social media platforms soon. We're a small, agile team doing many things, but on at least on LinkedIn, on the Magnus Worx page, what we try to do is we try to bring intention every month to one of our 11 rings. So since it's February and this is a month, Valentine's Day, and we think about relations.
Yes.
We're spending a month of intention building, relationship development and growth. So
yeah, that's good.
We try to bring in some repetition there, and then we'll announce book releases through those outlets as well. But I really, really appreciate the opportunity to bring attention to such a worthwhile cause.
Yeah, I'll put all the links. If you're on your device, make sure you check out the show notes on your device, because on the show notes, it will have all the links there. And because I'm a little delayed in getting podcasts out, because I have so many people that want to come on the podcast, this book might already be out. So if it is, I will definitely have a link there for you to check it out. But it sounds like there's some really good content on LinkedIn as well. But those 11 elements, if you personally want to address some things, that would probably be a great place to start. If your department is looking for a way to implement more data-driven wellness programs, Magnus Worx might be a good connection for them, and maybe reach out to you, Brian. Would they do that? Okay.
Share my email in the show notes as well. So
yeah, I'll do that as well. Man, this has been really interesting for me. I hope it's been interesting for y'all to kind of hear these different elements and to look at, just digging into raw data that could be helpful for wellness programs personally and for your department. Anything else that you wanted to throw in there, Brian? Just want to make sure.
No, I mean, I think, wellness is a challenging topic. I mean, early on, you asked my career, you woo-woo it. You're like, oh, yeah, whatever, too touchy-feely for me. But realistically, if you just look at data, and we're just specific data alone, cops die on average 10 years younger than the average. And that's because of stress. And so you're not taking your abilities to recognize and do something about the stress that you encounter in your life. Well, those are just sad realities that we have to figure out as individuals. And so bring attention to that. And I wish you and everybody listening that they kick those statistics in the butt and go 10 more plus years and beyond, because you do have the capacity to thrive.
I think that I appreciate you bringing up that last point, because I think a lot of times spouses and families sacrifice along with their officer, their law enforcement personnel. And we want you to be well. We want you to take care of yourself, because in that sacrifice, we don't want to then have you retired and not be able to go and play with us and enjoy those years in retirement. We want that sacrifice that all of us made as a part of this career to then equal the connection that we missed out on later on. And so that's why, I love that you said that last part, Brian, because that's why wellness is so important, because it's not just surviving the career, it's thriving through and outside of the career that is so important, because that's what life is, right?
We missed a critical part that we could talk a lot about, and that's the spouses too. I once had a sheriff say that the spouses are, kind of your crew on a racetrack, and no, they're in the car with you. They as much, if not more, stress than you do, and that's why we make a personal commitment in our organization that, when we, our return on investment to an organization, that if we're a client, we're going to provide resources to all family members, all retirees of the organization at no additional cost, because, developing those employees spans way past the organization. It needs to get into the family.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Brian Ellis, thank you so much from Magnus Worx. Thank you so much for joining us today. And guys, like I said, go check out the show notes for any other links. If you have not subscribed and you're on your device, please just hit that subscribe button and you'll get notified on when new podcasts come out. And make sure you check out all the resources at code4couples.com. And until next time, guys, y'all keep it Code 4. Take care. Don't forget to click that subscribe button on your device or get email updates by going to code4couples.com. While you're on the website, make sure you pick up my 71-page workbook and guide that goes with my book, The Essential Guide to Protecting Your Law Enforcement Relationship. Drop in the code podcast and download the workbook for free. Until next time, y'all, keep it Code 4.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cyndi, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.